Welcome to the Infinity Loop Group. I'm Riley.
I'm Krista.
And we're going to be diving into language beyond abstractions today. You know, it's very important to understand that we use language very differently. A lot of people will use a word and have a different attached meaning to it than someone else. And so it is so important when we are trying to connect to understand truly where someone's coming from and share where we're coming from as well, clarifying our definitions about meaning of things.
And I want to bring up something you said, Riley, that was so wonderful when you said, you know, in the infinity loop, you give people so much grace, even when they don't say something perfectly, to try to help them figure out what they're trying to say. So again, it's that not nailing someone when they use the wrong word and going, will you use that word? Will you use that word? Versus going, oh, what did that mean to you? I'm curious why you used it. Oh, did you mean that word? Okay, my understanding of the word is that. So that's how I take it.
Well, it's so well said because communication, in my opinion, at its highest form is a dance. It's a never a battle plan of words. It's a dance of ideas. Because the words are really just a projection of the ideas that we are trying to understand, the perspective that we are trying to understand. And when you are competitive or trying to catch someone on words, that's when you've shut down your ability to connect.
You know, this is also reminding me of that therapist we were listening to, Lane Adams, whatever, and how he said, you know, so many men that come into his office, they don't even have a clue what they're feeling. And I could think about how women could use that as the superiority thing because they can be more in touch with their feelings and more skilled and invested in learning the skills of how to communicate their feelings. So it can make it very unsafe where we are using our egos as women to catch men in their inaccuracy of words. Does that make sense?
Very much so.
Yeah, anytime we're sparring over words like that, yeah.
We've both lost.
Yeah, we're not in the dance.
One of the ways we traumatize one another is through the unskillful and abusive ways we use abstractions, absolutes, and generalizations. We all deserve the extra effort to clarify beyond bumper sticker living. Krista Voris.
I was playing around with writing a book called Bumper Sticker Christianity. And because they would just say all these absolutes. And I'd go, oh my God, that belongs on a bumper sticker, sounds like. But I don't want to live based on the bumper sticker, right? There's no love in that. There's no seeing. It's just everything is like the dogma. And that could be, we can see any quote unquote non-religious view that has a religious fervor to it. Social justice, right? Anything that can be, you go, ooh, that belongs on a bumper sticker. I don't know about that. Maybe we should use a little more clarity around that statement. I was talking about on one of my hikes with a friend of mine and how much I valued her input. Language matters. The yeah, but, the both and we need to clarify moments of how we communicate. She sharpens me. She's also an executive coach and organizational development, and a lot in the Enneagram too. I pride myself as one who explains the exceptions. I hear things through the filter of the exceptions because as someone intimately acquainted with abuse, I think, how would someone without healthy defenses hear that? How would someone who struggles in this or that way hear this? Where's that a dangerous statement and unskillfully delivered? What? They didn't just say that, did they? That's so codependent. Are you flippin' kidding me? Those are the things that would run through my head. One of the many things I love about my spiritual father, Richard Rohr, is he uses language like tends to, often, most likely, versus always and never as regular fare. I welcome any opportunity to sharpen my skills in communicating the nuances. My friend and I were talking about anger and how it's a God-given response to having a boundary violated. We then said in unison, unless someone's angry because they have a problem with anger, no boundary was crossed, but they're still angry because they're easily offended. Yeah. The thinking models I teach show us how we often feel anger because of our unquestioned assumptions and the data we choose to select. If we were more skilled at going to inquiry to verify what we're assuming or presuming and being transparent about our thought processes, we'd see how silly our anger so often is. We decided to take offense when it wasn't even what was going on in the circumstances or for the other person. We must interrupt our habituated way of relating that does this and learn the skills of connection, awareness, and inquiry. Just the other day, I got angry at someone close to me because I assumed what someone else was telling me who claimed to be an expert was correct. I didn't bother to verify the facts. The anger I was getting in touch with wasn't even about the issue at hand, which is very often with me. It's really about something else that I was ignoring. And I think that's also for other people too, that we can, when they're angry about something, you're like, whoa, where'd that come from? You could go, is there something else that you're angry about that you might not feel like you can speak up about? What's going on? But it got my attention where I wasn't honoring my needs and values. I was heartbroken at how I responded. These skills are a lifelong practice. For the problem of language, my friend and I talked about how organizational development, it's emphasized that all language is considered an abstraction. It doesn't necessarily have a set definition because words mean different things to different people. And the spiritual psychology field has conflicted definitions as well. That's why when, a coach will go, oh, well, that means that. Well, that means that. Well, that means that. It's like they're speaking definitively when you could say, well, no, this stream, like the word contemplation means completely different things based on what stream, in this stream, that's what that means. In that stream, that's what that means. In this view, this is how the ego is seen. It's much more comprehensive way of seeing. It's more whole seeing. It doesn't necessarily have a set definition, yeah. And then there's the confusion over ego, the big self versus small self, vulnerability and healthy boundaries, healthy anger and anger coming from being too offended and self-referential or narcissistic, and the ever-personal grid of dualism, which is the either-or thinking. With a contemplative mind, we hear the both and. I wrote Clarifying the Infinity Loop because someone was criticizing me that I don't, quote unquote, walk my talk because I talk about being open and receptive, but I'm not willing to be that for her. If you read my other chapters, it's clear there's a both and. We need our aversion and our inclusion, our anger and our empathy. We need our boundaries and our openness. We need self-love and selfless love. It takes clarifying language to handle the both and world of our growth. My intention is to grow in my communication skills. I teach what I need to learn most and have never been able to do these ideals without error. None of that diminishes me as being both love and lovable, or you. We celebrate that we're ever in the process of learning how to love well by practicing elegant and intelligent self-care. We fumble along in finding the right language, but that's where connection, awareness, and inquiry come in. If we all get better at that, we'll help each other get back on our feet.
Beautifully said, especially just the importance of walking this line of the both and with really everything. And
we're able to do that when we're not triggered in our ego, because there's this loving, we're in the dance. It's just, we're flowing and we're going, oh, I noticed. Yeah. Our ego is in the right place when we're in the dance.
Always looking for that inquiry. How will you be more mindful of language and create more both and as a bridge builder, learner, and leader? I think there's just so many opportunities for us in our lives to do these types of things. Anything from work to home relationships, just changing the language that is used in the household or in the workplace can really, I think, create so much more cohesiveness because people feel empowered by the openness of the conversation that gets developed from that, especially in the workplace.
Well, they're empowered also because, again, that's love, and that's what helps our brains operate at the highest. When they feel safe, they don't feel shame. There's nothing to brace yourself against. You can just let it come. Let the genius come out of another person because of the way you make it safe for them.
Wonderful. Where do you have the habit of reacting to a certain language instead of the habit of asking? When you say that, what does that mean to you? If someone acts miffed like we should, I know what they mean, we can say words and concepts mean different things to different people. So I want to hear your experience, how you experienced that.
Okay, so what I meant by that is, when I have done that to people who have a fragile ego, I'm like, oh, what did you mean by that? They can come back in a really defensive response. Well, of course, this is what I mean. Well, of course, that's the reason why she's single. I'm like, you get good at using your sword. You come back encouraged. You go, well, actually, that's not would be the only reason she gets single. Her husband could have died. Well, she could have never been married. You come back and go, no, the reason I'm asking is you get fast on your feet, right? That's the sword with language to go, oh no, I'm asking you this. I'm wondering why that got you mad. I didn't mean to get you mad. I'm just clarifying to be a more loving human being.
Well, it's so much of that is someone that is projecting their reality, not using language to connect, right? If someone puffs at your not understand or if someone brushes off your desire to inquire, they have no desire to connect and communicate. They have a desire to preach and project.
Yeah, or they're so easily, their nervous system is so easily offended and triggered. And again, when you preface it like I was saying in that, it's like, hey, language means different things to different people. So I'm not sure, Joe, what you mean by that. So let me, can you explain to me what that word I'm curious why you use that specific word.
Is there a way you will speak and help lead the conversation away from abstractions to more curiosity, humility, and honesty? I had a coaching client this weekend, and one of the big things that we kept talking about was, especially when he is in a more heated conversation with his wife, we talked about the importance of kind of just ending it all with a question. Right? Where if you say all these things, but you end it with a question, it just puts a softness to the conversation that creates a lot more freedom of flow. Because even though you might have said a bunch of maybe accusatory things, even when you finish it with a question, you're creating that space for going, this is what I'm assuming because of all the information I have. Maybe there's more information to be had there.
So the question did you give them ideas of the question?
Yeah, I mean, we went over a few different situations and how we could add a question into that. And to me, by adding the question, that just naturally makes you more humble and more honest.
Yeah, does that make sense? Am I missing anything? Tell me where I'm wrong. Can you clarify?
Well, and then it's again,
how are you feeling?
Especially when it's somewhat of a fight, you are no longer defending your point of view, but providing information and asking for their point of view, right? It's no longer, well, you said this is what I was thinking, this is what I was doing. It's, no, this is what you said, this is how it made me feel, this is what I assumed.
Because I took
what did I know?
Because I interpreted it this way,
right.
I felt this. This is what you said, and this triggered a story that I have. So that is how I experienced it versus you made me feel in your imperfection of using the exact perfect word.
Right. Well, and then again, that's no longer you made me feel, which is very accusatory, attacking, kind of belittling of the person.
And not taking responsibility for your own experience.
Right. Going, because of what this did and because of my own assumptions, now I feel this way. Please give me more information.
Yeah, and then I'm thinking of the flip side of that, Riley, is I know someone who would just say very cruel things and then go, oh, sorry you feel that way. And they were actually being cruel. They were someone that I should not have been dancing with because they wanted to not have accountability. They were getting too much of a narcissistic hit by being cruel and putting someone down, putting me down, and they weren't interested in, they didn't want to dance.
There was a comedian who just said that is the ultimate, fuck you, I don't care about you, is when someone goes, oh, I'm sorry you feel that way. Like they might as well be just flipping you off and going, yeah, I don't give a fuck what you think, because because again, they aren't trying to actually connect or understand. They're trying to write you off because their perspective is the reality.
Yeah, that's the discernment piece of going, who can you be in the infinity loop with, and who's not going to dance with you.
Well, these chapters go so well together as we jump into the next one called Ideas, Not Identity, the importance of communicating our ideas and not identifying with these ideas so that we can truly get to the truth collectively, not as an individual. Because if we don't get to the truth collectively, it does not matter if you have all the answers. We have to get there together. We are not our point of view. Bill Isaacs.
Yep. We are not our point of view, and that is where you can feel it when the ego hits, right? It's that's I am my point of view, and you don't agree with my point of view, so I'm going to get really heated because I am what I think, which we aren't. Thank you, Bill, for telling us that. He's one of the great fathers of organizational development. 3.5 months after my relationship with my necessary nemesis ended, we reconnected on the chairlift. Because of my recent and dramatic healing from the PTSD, I was high as a kite to feel safe and in my power being around him. I was one big red bouncy ball of love and happiness. I was actually saw the big red ball of the chair, like on the ski lift. I was like, oh, that's, I am a big bouncy red ball. Obviously I wasn't, okay, that concerned nearly everyone who knew what happened in the relationship. Obviously, I wasn't finished with my healing yet to be quote unquote okay and happy being around someone who isn't safe. I was trying to be open to any possibility that there was a miracle out there that he could change. It was as though I had forgotten all I went through, things that should have still disturbed the hell out of me. I was still disconnected from my anger that I needed to set that appropriate boundary. That is where there are things where you should not forget. While we rode,
That's where the accountability buddies really come in. Important,
While we rode the chairlift, he told me he was aware that his identity had been wrapped up in being right his entire life, and anyone who disagreed with him threatened him to his very core. Being questioned meant there was something wrong with him. That made for some intense defenses and constructing his life so he couldn't be challenged on anything of any consequence. He was in the power position. Anger and rage were at hand at any second to protect that ego. It's a scary world to be in or around. He'd become addicted to shutting others down by telling them they were the ones who were defended and protected if they didn't take everything he said as the truth. If there were any healthy defenses, any inquiry, anything that did not make the other person one beneath the great teacher, just was not allowed. Anger was not allowed. Even if you felt anger inside, not allowed.
I mean, to me, the thing that really stands out to that is, again, the simplest thing is someone trying to project their reality onto you.
Yeah.
Or are they trying to connect?
Yeah.
And that's like clearly someone that's manipulating and trying to project.
That man wept out loud with what appeared at the time, he was someone who could cry very easily, actually, at the time as a deep grief over the losses in his life because of it. There's the loss of his own freedom and the hurt and pain caused to others. If the pain is able to create in us a hunger and a commitment to love better, it's the sorrow that brings growth. Under it is a longing for freedom from our ego that doesn't serve us, a longing to love well, and a soberness over what's lost that will never be recovered. That makes us more aware of the preciousness of those who come into our lives and those still around. It's a dying that brings life. It's the bounce. Not everyone is able to transcend the limitations of their egos. There are those with certain personality disorders and pathologies that are essentially all ego and can't get past it. I was hearing this Sam Vaknin guy he's been diagnosed as a narcissist or sociopathic, but he's brilliant. And he's the one who coined the term narcissistic abuse, like in '95. So he has this real expertise on narcissism. But I heard just this short clip of him saying something like, narcissists don't have any ego. And I don't understand that. And I think he means sort of like no sense of self. Since then, people who were kind of aligned with him have parted ways. But so I don't know if I'm using the right language, but to the best of my ability, that's what it feels like, right? It feels like ego. Feels like ego to me. They may even be aware of losses but aren't able to change. No amount of trying to help them or love them will break through. We may love them and care for them, but we won't make the magic happen. Boy, is that true. That man roped me back in for a short period of time from that encounter, questioning that there was a crack in him with a capacity to change. I've had that with clients too, which are you just sit there and go, okay, let's see where they're not truly narcissists. And then at the end you're like, yeah, couldn't help them one bit. Couldn't help them. I soon discovered that those tears and words were a performance. I'm not sure he knew he was acting. The awareness wasn't real to drive him to change. The death of his attachment to his ego that love would require of him wasn't worth it. Not when he had people he paid to tell him he was, quote unquote, a good man. And that is what I would call false prophets, soothsayers. The Bible talks about a lot. But you see this through psychologists, coaches, spiritual teachers, some spiritual teachers, astrologers, these healers that people go to, and they never, these healers, quote unquote, never confront their client's ego, their shadow. They're all good. And so you can pay people who will tell you how good you are, how all their issues you're having are the other person's, how, let me just tell you how to work with the narcissist. But you don't have any of narcissism in you. You don't have any issues in you. And that is really common. And so that was something I was dealing with in the relationship. It was like, oh, well, so-and-so says I'm such a good man. I'm such a good man. And he knew in his heart he wasn't. And that is something, sadly, I see. I feel like I picked therapists that were just mean, because I wanted to be cracked open, mean and kicked my ass. But and I, you can lose business when you don't cater to someone's ego. You can still be kind, but our job, as Carolyn May says, is to show people their shadow through a safe, creating inquiry of, how do you think that might be in you? What do you, teaching them these principles very gently, coming back and afflicting. We comfort the afflicted, but we afflict the comfortable. And when we are too comfortable in our delusion, something needs to wake someone up.
Amen.
And you've earned the right. Only when we've earned the right, to speak into someone's life. I also will say that a few years ago, he reached out to me in via Facebook or something, and said he'd been working on himself and needed to make amends to me. And, I chose not to reach out to him because he also has a pattern and agenda of just making sure no one's speaking ill of him, and gets people back on kind of to drop their discernment and liking his posts and blah, blah, blah. And I didn't want to play that game. I also didn't want to subject myself, but I can say in my heart that I certainly hope that he has grown and has found peace. And I only feel love. I feel no judgment or that in any way I'm superior. My heart fills with love for the role he played in my life, and that the journey that we walked through. And I hope I would love to be wrong about every person I've ever encountered that seemed very fixed. I would love for something, but I no longer want to play that dance where I think that I can create change when there's no true self-awareness. There are those who aren't interested in growth. Being controlled and held captive by their egos their whole life seems more appealing than dying to the small self. That is where I was reflecting on this morning. I think that's really the issue, Riley. It's not always that people don't know how to move past their ego. I think there's some of that, but quite frankly, there is no hungering and thirsting after righteousness. There is no Joan of Arc cry that she said, God, make me good. There is no desiring to be free and aware of how that they're in a prison of their own egos.
I find that it's almost discouraged in most of society to have that. You're looked down upon. How silly of you to have these religious or spiritual longings. Don't you know we live in a materialistic physical world? Like, you know what I mean? Like, majority of society, it's like we dismiss people that strive to be spiritual. At least I get that vibe in the two extremes of society, to where they're so open and so excited for anything spiritual outside of the church, or there's you're a woo-woo. If you think any religious thing, anything spiritual, anything that's not some hardcore science, it's like, oh, you're a woo-woo. You must not be a logical thinker, or it's very dismissive of that spiritual thinking.
Yeah, I think, well, the spiritual part too is I would use the word connection to our soul. There's different words we can use for what spirituality means. But this has worked for me for so many decades. I'm not willing to let these addictions go of how I relate, how I get my needs met in the world. And partly is because the ego can't fix the ego, and we try to do that, and we try to white knuckle it, and we can't do that. It's only through death to our attachment. And some people just don't have that chip. They have no interest, because the work that it takes is a work of death and letting go. And Jesus said, seek first the kingdom of God and its righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. And you were saying that in the last podcast, without quoting him, basically saying, if we continue to put our spiritual practice where it needs to be as this primary awareness, all these other things will be added unto us. We will be, and we were saying, yes, you will show up for your life in the most courageous way. You will make sure you have a roof over your head and do what you need to do to take care of yourself and those that you're responsible for. But you put first, your sound book, as the Tibetans do. What is the truth that I am washing myself in day by day by day, feeding myself by these streams of life that can make me the capacity to live from the true self so much more accessible.
I love that. There's an energy I get from thoughts that make me feel separate, superior, or important. And there's an energy I get from connection. One makes my world small, and one lets me touch infinity. Yeah,
I wrote that in an Instagram post. And that's when we say the ego feels good. You feel good when you win. When you can judge someone, you go, at least I'm not like that. But it makes your world very small. You can feel the ego hit. And one is just totally expansive, right? Because you are no longer defined by your ego. So you're big. You're touching infinity. I'm aware when I'm in the former energy, I feel the charge, but it's become a yucky charge for me now and rather disgusting. Those who don't want to let go of their attachment to their egos that don't serve haven't been convinced of the good news that there's a true self that's more powerful, indestructible, and ever abundant already there. It's who we really are. There's nothing wrong with our small selves. It's just not the whole picture. And that's really what I was saying is I can't, God is the great seducer. However I come into their lives, I realize there's so many people I cannot seduce to want to move past the ego mind that is worrying and stressed out and in scarcity and running all the time and offended and empty. And no matter what I do, and it's like I'm not seducing them.
Well, to me, what even just kind of registered is the small self is the self that uses other things to make it big. Right?
Woo!
So the small self is anytime you're using your career to define who you are, anything that you need outside of yourself to make yourself bigger is your small self at work.
God, that's so good. That's it. And we are those things, right? It's like I said, it's not bad. It just doesn't go far enough.
Well, it's not your true identity, right?
Yeah.
So often people will go, oh, well, I'm a professor. Oh, I'm a this to bring up as these things of identity. But you talk about as you really get to know someone, that isn't who they are. That is a job that can put them in a box, but that is not their true self. That's not you don't fall in love with that person because of their career or what they do, but how they show up in your life and how they talk to you.
So good. I love it. In dialogue, it's taught in the concept of realizing we're talking about ideas, not identity. We do a lot of work around where the ego serves and doesn't. When we transcend the limitations of our egos, we're able to suspend our point of view to hear and learn from another. We get to keep our point of view if we decide to, but we're able to be in an expanded awareness without the constriction of feeling threatened that someone sees things differently. It's having a learning container for our communication. Some people love to educate themselves, but in terms of communication, they're certain of their beliefs and are self-sealed. It takes intention on the part of those around them to see what need is behind that person's communication style and connect with them through inquiry. If we all normalize the concept, we're talking about ideas, not identity. We'd be closer to dialogue and discussing the quote unquote undiscussable. And that means there's so many things that you can't discuss because it's either, triggers people too much, or it embarrasses someone or makes somebody uncomfortable. And when we can go, hey, we're just talking about ideas, this is not identity, it takes the heat out of it.
Well, it's how many times go, let's just not talk about politics, right? Instead of going, well, no, why can't we all be adults and have an actual adult conversation where you're not emotionally charged to the point where you need to be yelling at your family members because they don't see the world the same way as you do. Maybe you should be more looking at yourself and going, well, maybe I'm not communicating this in a way that they can understand properly.
Or I'm coming off superior and that's why, or they're coming off superior. It's really how skillfully and where's the energy we're coming from anytime we're talking to anybody, right? We dropped into the infinity loop to be able to even talk about these concepts.
Yeah.
And if we're too charged, then we need to step away and say, I'm going to come back, I need to do some deep breaths. We'd experience a spaciousness in our bodies, minds, and spirits that would be habit-forming. We discovered that the loss of our attachment to our identities based on our ego constructs isn't that scary after all. Once we let go, we find we are held. We meet who we really are, and it's enough. Talk about someone who's at peace within themselves. There's a time to weep when we realize holding on to our identities hurts us and those around us, but joy comes in the morning. It's a quote unquote bright sadness that's aware of our shortcomings, but full of the hope that every new day brings our ever-growing desire to learn to love well, think together, and see each other in a powerful way. That's the kind of power we want to get addicted to. We could also do ego after this if you want.
In what ways is your ability to love, lead, hear, learn, show respect, and be respected hindered when you think your ideas, your identity, your conviction, or your direction are you? Yeah, I mean,
can you feel that within yourself? You get very passionate about things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a very passionate person, and it's definitely something I'm always regulating. But yeah, I mean, the more we are connecting to our ideas instead of sharing them openly, honestly, the more we're willing to defend them as if they are who we are.
Yeah, connecting, when you mean connecting, meaning identifying.
Right.
That's
yes, identifying. And when we identify too closely to our points of view, then we're defending it not as a space of because this is a good idea, and we are having the dance of understanding the truth, but because you now identify it with it, you have to defend it as if it's your religion. That's where people become very dogmatic of they lose the ability to think critically because they are so attached to whatever point of view.
And then you actually can connect with somebody, hopefully, by tell me, that's curious, where does that, why is that certain issue so important to you? It's a way of building a bridge.
Or even when you're phrasing your point of view, phrasing it with questions that create the engagement for the person to think about what you are sharing, not just creating an environment for them to rebuttal, with their talking points. Mm-hmm. The inquiry really requires another level of engagement and thought from the person for them to, instead of just having their quick natural response.
And you do choose, you read the room, right? And you do choose, like there's many, many people that don't want anything they say questioned. They don't want to engage. They don't want to give you an explanation of why they believe what they do. It's just, that's what they heard from on the news about so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so that framed the narrative. And they really don't want to engage, right? They don't want to dance. But I just don't want to play, I just don't want to lose my integrity in the interaction. I don't want to pretend that I always agree, right?
Yeah, very much so. Is there an area or relationship that trips you up and you get triggered by your identity? We are not our point of view. And you struggle to detach and see you're just talking about ideas. The one I see the most is politics, right? They identify with their team more than they even identify or understand the policies and the things that are truly going to affect our lives and how they affect our lives. I find most people get caught in platitudes and say emotional information as if it's fact. And if you are to try and come at it from a different angle, you are, again, some emotionally charged word, right? Whether it's racist or anything that they're using it to dismiss your perspective, instead of actually attacking the idea, they attack the person.
Yeah. Something you just said. And I think that, when we're saying this, we're looking at our own selves, and how that's the great thing about podcasts now, is that there are people who will so unpack what someone's policies or track record as a politician that can unearth some of assumptions that we've had about people. Oh, we really like them. Like, oh, we didn't know about that and that war. I mean, that's the openness that we're also saying about ourselves, right? Of how we think for ourselves and are in to be a learner, and a growth mindset is to live in the infinity loop, and have that level of childlikeness of learning and curiosity and connection.
Amen. Curiosity and connection. And I think that's a wonderful place to end with. We are not our ideas, because we do not identify with our ideas. Thank you again so much for joining us on the Infinity Loop group. We'll Hopefully this was another journey that helped provide some perspective and tools to help you in your life. Please like, subscribe, and share, and have a wonderful rest of your day.